Hi, my name is Amadeo and I work as a researcher for FairFin. FairFin is a Belgian non-profit that strives for a financial system that's good for the planet and its people. Money that's invested today will determine the world of tomorrow. But what happens if that money is invested in things that harm our future? Each year, billions flow to polluting industries such as fossil fuels and plastics. FairFin digs deep into these numbers of our banks, and we speak out when investments are harmful. In this FairFin Plastic Podcast, I want to talk to you about the research we did with FairFin on the financing of plastic production. Because in order to stop the plastic flood, we need to take a look at the companies that make plastic and the money making it all possible from our banks.
Nobody likes to use plastic, use stuff that becomes waste so quickly. So I think it's important to develop alternatives that make it as easy and not more expensive for people to do the right thing. And then I'm convinced that people will do it.
This episode, I will take a look at how plastic became a part of our world in a very short amount of time. I invited Joan Marc Simon, the director of Zero Waste Europe. Together, we will take a look at the mechanisms behind the plastic market that make us buy so much unwanted plastics, and how we need to rethink the role of plastics in our society. Today we are joined by Joan Marc Simon, the director of Zero Waste Europe. Hi Joan Marc, we're very glad to have you here with us, but please introduce yourself to our listeners who might not know Zero Waste Europe yet.
Hello and thanks for the invitation. Zero Waste Europe is an organization, is a network of organizations around Europe. Basically what we do is we try to implement zero waste policies in cities and with companies, and we try to influence European and national legislation to advance zero waste across the board.
Now, last week we sat down with Delphine to talk about plastic as a material, to talk about the plastic impact that we know, the soup in the ocean, the waste on our streets. But this episode is on the idea of plastic. What does that mean? The impact of plastic beyond its material?
Well, plastic has transformed our relationship with resources in a way that we can do things that we could not do in the past. But what it means as well is that we have introduced a material into our lives that we don't know how to manage. And by that, I don't mean only waste management. It's also like the impact that it's having on our health or on the next generations. So it means actually taking quite a big risk for the future, because it's a material that we really don't know and we don't know how to manage.
So we don't know the impact just yet on our health. We know that it's bad for the environment and our climate, but plastic is something that is durable and sustainable, and it's something that we only use once. This is something strange with how we use plastic in our daily lives, isn't it?
It depends how you use plastic. I mean, you look at plastic in automotive, for example, or in built environment, and in buildings, plastic will last 20 years. And the first plastic, when it was invented, actually was through plastic. It's true that there's some applications in which plastic is used for a very small periods of time, and that doesn't make sense. However, even for the occasions when we use plastic for durable materials, such as cars, as I said, or buildings, that plastic is not designed to be reused or recycled. So actually, if you take into account that, like the perspective of a time lapse of 1,000 years, whether we use it for a second or we use it for 10 years, is still a waste of resources, because that is resources, hydrocarbons that basically go into plastic and then become waste. And you cannot do anything with it anymore.
So if we, like you said, in 1,000 years, and we'll go into the future, what's going to happen with all the plastic that we're using in our daily lives?
Well, good question. I mean, we know that most of the plastic that is out there is going to be there, because most of it doesn't degrade, or it takes thousands or hundreds of years to degrade. And there's going to be lots of legacy toxics and legacy materials. The problem with plastic is that it's so dispersed everywhere that it's impossible to manage. and that even if in the next 10, 20, 100 years we manage to find a way to properly manage this waste, it will be so dispersed that we cannot actually bring it together. So yeah, it's a bit like radioactive waste, but instead of having a lifespan of tens of thousands of years, it will be thousands of years.
So what I'm hearing is that our plastic mountain is piling up, and we don't have any way to deal with it just yet. So to ask a depressing question, have we reached a point of no return?
We have reached a point of no return for the plastic that is out there. Because as I said, you cannot clean the oceans of plastic or the environment or our bodies. What we can do, of course, for the future is to stop actually adding to the pile. But clearly, we cannot go back on the pollution we have created. We can clean a bit of it, but we will only scratch the surface because we don't have the means to collect all or to address all the damage that has been done.
So when we, FairFin, began our research into the financing of plastic producers, I noticed this strange flaw within the architecture of the entire plastics markets. The classic supply and demand rules, they didn't apply to plastics. Because if you look around, we don't have a demand for plastic. The plastic industry floods the customers with plastic. How does it come then that it's such a supply-driven issue?
Well, it started like that. I mean, nobody asked for plastics when plastics were introduced in the post-Second World War period. And I think that plastic is the catalyzer of globalization in a way. And globalization meant that you needed to actually find the material that allows you to bring stuff that is produced in one corner of the world to the other corner of the world. So 60, 70 years ago, you would probably eating only like stuff that was produced in the proximity. Now, thanks to plastic and thanks to energy, etc., we can consume stuff that has been harvested probably, 6 months ago in the other side of the world and brought to you. So yeah, if globalization is here to stay the way we know it, plastic is necessary, and therefore that's how it's pushed.
So at the core of the plastic problem is globalization and not the material of plastic.
I think that plastic has a place in our society, but we should change completely the way we relate to plastics, because we need to use it in a different way. We need to have full traceability and know exactly what is in there, and we need a lot less of it. I mean, it's crazy to, as you say, continue to push this supply-driven element. First, we should say what are our needs. Based on that, you define what are the materials that you need in order to have a happy life. Instead of let's bomb people with products, make them buy as much as possible, and not care about the waste and the impact, because we see where that is driving us.
Do people not care about the impact? Because the recent polls that I've seen show that 75% of the people agree that single-use plastic should be banned as soon as possible. So it seems that the people are changing also with their perception of plastics.
Nobody likes to use plastic, use stuff that becomes waste so quickly. But if you don't give the alternative to people, then I think these polls are not very useful. So I think it's important to develop alternatives that make it as easy and not more expensive for people to do the right thing. And then I'm convinced that people will do it.
Earlier this year, we had the United Nations Environmental Assembly, where we had the first big talks on a plastic treaty. What are your thoughts on this evolution of that policy?
I think it's good that we're going to have a plastics treaty. It's good that the mandate is to have it so quickly, because it's going to be negotiated in 2 or 3 years' time. We don't yet know what is going to be included in there. Also, we need to see in which conditions these negotiations are going to take place. Because, for example, they say they want to create a kind of a scientific committee or scientific panel. But who are going to be the scientists? We know that most of the scientists working on plastic are paid by the industry. So, how are we going to guarantee the independence of some of the bodies there? And again, even if you have ambitious goals, how do we deal with global treaties when the majority of the countries in the world don't have any enforcement capacity? So in general, I think it's a relative good news. It has potential, but I think that the change needs to come from somewhere else, honestly.
So let's talk European Union then, because in the European Green Deal we'll have a lot of new rules on circular economy. They'll be a lot stricter and they'll be enforceable, right? So how do you think the circular economy plans of the European Union will go into force?
I think the European Union has more capacity to enforce laws, and the European Union is true that is a world leader when it comes to circularity measures. And it's great that we have increased the recycling targets for plastic and for other materials. We're also going to see like percentages of recycled content in new products, which is good. However, for the moment, we don't have any legislation on plastic or like packaging reuse, for example. When we look at plastic for applications such as, I don't know, automobiles or construction, there's nothing also about using less. It's not that we need better cars. We need different kind of mobility. So it's the same with packaging. It's not that we need more plastic packaging. What we need to see is actually what do we need the packaging for, and is plastic the best way to use it, and use less plastic altogether. So what we're doing is good, but it's far from enough if we really want to have circular plastics or carbon neutral plastics. So we need to really scale up the efforts, and policy making as usual is not going to make it.
So when you say that we need to rethink the way that we use packaging, should we rethink it, or should we go back to 60, 70 years ago when we didn't really use plastics the way we do now? Milk came in bottles supplied by the milkman.
I don't think we can go back because the society has changed. So there was a reason why the milkman was coming, or we were cooking at home. That implied also that, for example, women were at home cooking and washing instead of working today, and the children, etc. Like families have changed, and there's some things in the past that I don't think we should go back to. However, we can use ideas of the past for the future. Like today, there's lots of people that consume food to take away. There's no reason to actually take a single-use packaging for that. The same for the shopping. I mean, 6 years ago, we were not shopping online. Now people do. So it should be possible to shop stuff that is produced locally without packaging and brought at home, because there's lots of people who are also older. 60, 70 years ago, majority of population was like 30, 40 years old, average age. Now the average age in Europe is a lot older. So actually these people, we need to have packaging that serves also the needs of the new demographics. So I think we can inspire ourselves in some things of the past, but we need to create new systems. As I said before, it's important that people still get to consume, and of course reduce the consumption in terms of environmental footprint, but still they need to eat, and that it is delivered in the best way possible.
This made me think of advertising, because people want to sell us their product, and they want to have a packaging which is colorful or sparkly or whatever. And they want to advertise their product in the best way possible and sell it to us. Do you think advertising is important to reduce our use of plastics?
Of course. We need to understand that, there's lots of multinationals that have seen that actually selling the stuff in plastic, it starts to actually go against their brand. So they starting to change packaging, and sometimes not even changing for a better packaging. It's just moving away from plastic, which sometimes can increase the environmental impact, but that would be for another conversation. What we are seeing as well is that for some segments of population, they are tired of marketing. Like, for example, when I go shopping, I don't want to see brands. And I see that lots of people, depending which shops do you shop, what you are looking for is quality. The more marketing doesn't equal more quality. But it depends. I understand that marketing plays a very important role for lots of people in our society. And but I also know that lots of companies want to portray themselves as being environmentally friendly. And a way to do that is that this is recyclable, this is reusable, etc. There's lots of greenwashing there, which is problematic. Greenwashing, however, is like when you buy a bottle and say, this is a green bottle, or it's made with renewable energy, or just 100% recycled content and 100% recyclable. And actually, it's very easy to know that that is not 100% recyclable and not 100% made of recycled content. So what we see is the majority of brands, they use greenwashing in a sense that they sell green credentials that actually are not true to market their products. So yeah, it's nothing wrong with saying that this bottle is 100% recyclable, provided it's recyclable. There's no European definition of what is recyclable. So for the moment, they can claim whatever they want.
So how can we break free from this idea of plastics? How can we, if we want to split it up in 3 sections, what the corporations have to do, what the policymakers have to do, and what we as individuals have to do?
Well, it depends what kind of corporations, because of course the corporations that are extracting oil and refining it into plastic are different than that. For example, they take in the plastic and shaping it into a bottle, and different from the retailers. I think that the retailers and the bottlers, they should look for alternative systems to deliver their goods without actually having to externalize the cost of the packaging on the society, which is what they're doing today. They put stuff that cannot be recycled, end up in the environment. We and the next generations pay the cost. For the upstream, for those who are actually producing plastics, etc., I still don't understand why we are not actually taxing more heavily the production of single-use plastic. But maybe that's all for policymakers. So I think the policymakers, what they need to do is create the legal certainty and give the direction of where things should be going. So in this sense, for example, when we look at the packaging, we need a completely new infrastructure. The infrastructure for single-use packaging or single-use in general didn't exist 70 years ago. We created a system that is based on actually us taking out a bag of garbage, and then it goes to a place, is sorted, blah, 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 blah. This is extremely wasteful. Recycling rates are low, and it's difficult to increase them. We need to create a system where actually you don't take out waste. You take out, it could be a bottle, it could be something else, that can be then a resource, it can be collected, high quality collection, washed, refilled, and reintroduced in the system. And in order to do that, you need to build infrastructure. We have a system that is benefiting the current producers, but they externalize in the cost of on society. If we want to change the system, we need new infrastructure. So policymakers should guarantee this, should guarantee that there's going to be public investment for this, and should guarantee that the companies are going to be given targets that they need to use this infrastructure. So if all of this happens, what you will have is that the citizens will be able to choose between a system that is more expensive, that is more polluting, and that is more uncomfortable, for a system that is cheaper, that is you have infrastructure there, and that is less polluting. And when you have that choice, I think citizens will choose the right thing. In the meantime, because it's not going to happen overnight, I think it's important that citizens continue to put pressure on both companies that are doing the wrong thing, and on policymakers, so that we get the infrastructure for the new economy.
It seems that there's not a big future for plastic. With everything that you've been saying and that Delphine said last week, it's such a strain on our carbon budget, it has such a big climate impact. There's legislation coming on plastics, whether they will like it or not.
Well, on the other hand, there is like an unprecedented investment into plastic recycling. Plastic recycling, mechanical recycling, chemical recycling, and lots of other technologies that are not very proven are getting lots of investment from the banking sector. But let's not forget that still recycling, even the best recycling, is a linear economy. Because even if you recycle PET bottle into a PET bottle, you cannot make one bottle out of one bottle. You are always going to be losing material in the process. So therefore, the logical thing to do would be like, how do we preserve the value of the material? And that's what is not being invested in. We're investing into actually perfecting the recycling part. So money is flowing. Before it was flowing into incinerators, now it's flowing into recycling, and we need to push so that it flows into alternatives.
Big investments in more recycling and trying to perfect recycling, but still being able to consume more. It reminds me of classic economic theories that teach us that in order to sustain our economy, we need to keep on growing. We need to produce more and grow more in order to sustain our economic model. It feels like that won't be possible. We'll need more than just a packaging revolution. It seems like we need an economic revolution as well.
Yeah, or the way we understand the economics. Clearly, the ideology of growth for the sake of growth is now getting like to almost a parody of what was intended to do. We need to move away from this. There's nothing wrong with economic activity, but economic activity that comes at the expense of the planet or the people or biodiversity, etc., it just means that we're using the wrong indicators. Most of the history of humankind, economics have been about really like what economic activity is building on the community so that people can be better fed, better serviced, with more security, etc. So it's a matter of, I think, as you say, we need to reconsider what actually brings value to the economy and start counting things differently. And one of the results we'll have is that probably doesn't make sense to produce so much waste, be it plastic waste or other kinds of waste, because actually they don't bring to our well-being. They just add to the GDP, but actually they decrease our well-being and therefore should be going against the economy. So yeah, we need to rethink economics altogether.
There's a long way ahead of us to reach this goal, so I won't take up any more of your time. So you'll have some more hours today to fight the system.
Thank you.
Plastic and plastic production are bad for the environment, the climate, and our health. That's why FairFin demands banks to stop investing in companies that are planning new plastic projects. Through our website www.fairfin.be, Belgian citizens can send complaints to their banks. Help us put pressure on them and send a complaint to your bank. Are you curious to hear more? In the next episode of the FairFin Plastic Podcast, I'll zoom in on Project 1, an enormous plastic project by Ineos in the port of Antwerp. Together with Tatiana from Client Earth, we will talk about this big plastic expansion, the impact it will have, and most importantly, how we can stop it.
You have a slow burn process where you're extracting fossil fuels to make things that end up in the trash and the carbon ends up in the atmosphere.